Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Coach Bill's Sports Show. So we're gonna get down into it. Get it started. Don't know why I did it that way, but who knows? We're gonna have fun tonight. Thank you for joining us. If it's your first time, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really helps us out here at the channel, and we'll just get into it. As always, I'm Coach Bill. And this is our ranking show. So, starting off the rankings, we always go with a few honorable mentions. Penn State, UNC, Syracuse, Florida State, and South Carolina. Big one on here I want to point out is UNC. They still have a shot at their conference championship. It's a long shot. Not going to lie. It's a long shot, but still a shot. If they had beaten... Oh, sorry about that. If they had beaten Notre Dame earlier in the season and were an undefeated team right now, UNC would be banging on the doors to represent the ACC in the college football playoffs. But because of the loss to Notre Dame, Clemson losing to Notre Dame as well, it doesn't look like the ACC is going to make the playoffs this year, folks. Unfortunately. But continuing into the ACC, let's get into the top 25 here. Number 25 is the NC State Wolfpack. And then we got Baylor, Illinois, Washington, and Wake Forest. Illinois is the only one in this section that still has a resemblance of a chance at making their conference championship. Unfortunately for Illinois, when they do make that championship game, if they do, it'll be against Ohio State or Michigan. So, good job, you won your side. But it's not a great win, unfortunately. Still ranked, really good for the Fighting Illini. Really good season so far for that team. Let's go ahead and get into the top 20. Number 20 is Liberty. Number 19 with a big win against Clemson is Notre Dame. Kentucky is still hanging around 18. USC at 17. Minnesota at 16. Liberty's head coach essentially played for an audition this past week for the Auburn Tigers. Notre Dame's head coach was playing for a different reason, for the recruits. He's got to rebuild that Notre Dame program. And he's not got a lot there currently. But the team is fighting, and that's all you can really ask for. Let's go ahead and get into 15 through 11. Number 15, we have Oklahoma State. 14, we have Utah. 13 is Texas. 12 is UCLA. Number 11 is LSU. So the three things on this one. Texas, there's going to be a quarterback competition next year, and I want to see it. I want to see what happens, because let's say Arch Manning gets to Texas and Quinn Ewers keeps the job. Does he stay? That's a big question. What if Arch Manning comes in and beats out Quinn Ewers? Does Quinn Ewers stay? That's a big question. So there's a possibility of a highly touted quarterback being out in essentially free agency, which is NIL now. So Texas is going to have some issues here in the next few years. It'd be really interesting to see what happens and how that plays out. Team that's surprising this year is LSU, leading the SEC West. LSU. They have 2 losses. One loss to Tennessee, one loss at the very beginning of the season to Florida State. But they've gotten some big wins, some very big wins. They got to close it out though. They've got the inside track to the SEC championship, and they still have a chance to make the playoffs. So there's a lot on the line for LSU. Let's go ahead and get into the top 10. Number 10, we got Ole Miss. Second in the SEC West. Looking at LSU and Ole Miss, it's really a coin flip for me, and it's 100% based off of which team shows up for both of them on a neutral site. Right now, just because of different things that's happened this season, particularly the big loss to Tennessee at home for LSU, is the difference right here between 11 and 10. It's a small gap, though, I will say that, but there still is a little bit of a gap between 11 and 10. LSU could definitely break into the top 10 this weekend, but we'll get into that later. Number 9, we got Oregon. Oregon Ducks. Bo Nix. Hey, man. Doing things up there. I see you. Only thing you had to do was stop playing SEC opponents. Unfortunately, for Bo Nix, the hype's getting big. And there's a strong chance that he may see an SEC opponent in a bowl game, or there's an outside shot that he could see him in a playoff game. And I'm sorry, Bo, but from what I've seen from you, you don't want to be playing the SEC. It's as simple as that. You don't want to play the SEC. But Oregon's got a good team up there. Pac-12, potential champs, Oregon Ducks. Number 8, Michigan. They are the lower of the two Big Ten teams, simply because neither one of them's really played a tough schedule, but because Ohio State was ranked, or because Notre Dame was ranked so high when Ohio State played them, that kind of gave Ohio State the edge right here. I think the game is a lot closer than what the algorithm is showing us right now. Right now, it would say it's a 9-point favorite for Ohio State over Michigan this year. Part of that is because it's in Michigan, or it's in Ohio State, which is a 3-point swing. But 9 points does seem like a lot. But what Michigan does really well is an old school style of football. We're going to run the rock, we're going to play defense, and we're just going to grind you into a pulp. That can still work in college football. Unfortunately, we don't have a 12-team playoff. I really wish this is the year we had one, personally, because there's a lot of good storylines that could work. But I don't see Michigan making the playoffs. But good news for Michigan, they'll probably go to the Rose Bowl. Next up, you got Kansas State, number 7. Kansas State's really had a good season. TCU is the story out of the Big 12, but Kansas State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, all those guys have really done well this season and really set up for the most entertaining conference in college football right now. And it's just because every given week, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know which teams are going to show up. And it's just a fun brand of football right now. It's still not the best conference. They're probably third best, in all honesty. But it's still a wonderful game to watch and a wonderful product to watch. So, Kansas State, number 7. Number 6, Clemson, big loss. Big loss to Notre Dame. Not only in points, but in total package for Clemson. It's going to be really, really hard for Clemson to make the playoffs this year. It's unfortunate, but it's going to be very, very hard. They need a lot of dominoes to fall right for them, which for Coach Sweeney is the goal of every season. They've got a lot of talent. They've got a lot of talent returning. Don't sleep on Clemson, especially in a bowl game this year or next year. But I think for the rest of this year, the ACC's out of the tournament. So, sorry, ACC. Well, let's get into some guys that are still in there, which is Ohio State. Ohio State, to me, is the better of the Big Ten teams. Simply because their offense can do more things more ways. They've shown you they can run the ball. They've shown you they can pass the ball. They show you they can adapt to the weather. They can do different things, which is why Ohio State is the better of the two teams between them and Michigan. That and they've got some serious studs on defense. Now, they may not show up every game, but they still are there. They still have that potential to show out. Another team that's got some studs, that's got some potential to show out. Number 4, Alabama. I understand a lot of people are not going to like this. 2-loss to Alabama up here. But Alabama lost to Tennessee by a field goal on the road and lost at a last-second play in overtime on the road. So they went on the road twice, lost twice to those teams. Both of them were last-second decisions. Be very clear, the talent on Alabama isn't going anywhere. They may have some coaching changes at the end of this year because Nick Saban will be the first to tell you that 2 losses is too many for Alabama. But there's probably going to be new offensive and defensive coordinators next year. Talent's there. This is not a team I want to see in any capacity when it comes to bowl games. They may have a couple opt-outs, but it's very rare for Nick Saban to have those opt-outs. And they're still a strong team. I don't want to see any weekend. So they're still at number 4. Top 3. Number 3, undefeated TCU. The Horned Frogs just keep finding ways to win. I can't remember exactly how many games that they've been down in this year and came back and won, but it seems to be a ton. Seems like every game they get down, they find a way back. They got some talent. They're playing some tough teams. They're going to have a wonderful season. My concern is when they get to the playoffs. Notice I didn't say if, I said when. Because if TCU wins out, they will be in the playoffs. TCU is doing well against Big 12 teams. But when you make the playoffs and you've got the likes of Georgia, you got the likes of Ohio State, maybe even a Tennessee and LSU, teams that can punch you in the mouth and just keep punching like it's Iron Man versus Hulk. Does TCU have it in them to keep that fight coming back? I just don't know. They can do it against competition where they may be more talented than, but can they do it against competition where the talent level is equal or maybe even better? That's the question I have for TCU. I love them. It's a wonderful story. I can't wait to see if they go undefeated. They've got some huge tests up ahead that we'll talk about later on, but TCU is one hell of a team. Number 2, the University of Tennessee. Yes, they lost to Georgia. Georgia is a dominant team. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's hard to put into words just how dominant Georgia was in that game. But taking a step back and looking at the numbers, Tennessee has played the most ranked teams. They're the most battle-tested. And now they still have a shot at the playoffs as a one-loss team. Personally, for me, I think they're the number 1 one-loss team in the nation. I think they're ranked number 5 in the polls, right in the playoff poll right now, with Ohio State and Michigan both ahead of them. One of those teams is going to get a loss. We'll get into that in a minute. But I think Tennessee makes the playoffs this year as a one-loss team. But the team that beat them, new king of the hill, Georgia. First of all, let me stop. Let me give you your props. That was one hell of a game. I do think neutral site would be a little different, but I don't think it's a loss for you. There were some things I saw from Georgia previously that got covered up because of one reason and one reason only, and that's that pass rush. And you were down. You were down a key player for your pass rush, and you still were able to put one in. So bravo, Georgia. You deserve the number one ranking. You should be number one. You should be undefeated going into the SEC championship game. I don't think there's a gigantic threat, but there still is a threat to lose the SEC championship game. But they are... It's going to be hard to pick against Georgia until the playoffs with how the schedule is built. I'll just leave it at that. Speaking of playoffs, let's go into our tiers. If you're new, every week the tiers kind of break out and you kind of see a difference in points. So right now, Georgia, Tennessee, TCU, and Alabama are our 4 highest points. So there are quote-unquote playoff teams. Outside looking in is Ohio State, Clemson, Kansas State. I know Alabama's not making the playoffs this year. I know Ohio State or Michigan's probably going to make the playoffs. Clemson's not. Oregon still has a chance. LSU has an outside chance, but we'll get into that in a second. What you need to do. So Georgia, TCU, Ohio State, Michigan. Look at me right here. Look at me right here. All you got to do is win. It's that simple. Just win. Doesn't matter anything else. Georgia, you win out, you're in. TCU, you win out, you're in. Ohio State, Michigan, you win out, you're in. Because the other one's going to lose. Simple as that. Tennessee still has a shot if Georgia goes undefeated into the playoffs. Because then you start looking at, okay, who are our one-loss teams? You're going to have Michigan sitting there. You're going to have Tennessee sitting there. Possibility of Oregon sitting there. And looking at those teams, for the number 4 seed, it's very simple and easy for me to pick Tennessee, not just because of my fandom, but because of what I've seen on the field. Now, can that still change? Yes, it can. There's a possibility. There is a strong possibility that Tennessee wins out, but it's not as explosive as they were earlier in the season. Oregon wins out and is able to do some things, but it's harder. Let's go ahead and get to that one. First of all, let's go to Clemson. Clemson must win out and have no undefeated teams. So they need Georgia to take a loss, Ohio State to take a loss, Michigan to take a loss, and TCU to take a loss. Only when everybody's at one loss does Clemson really start to creep back into the conversation. Outside of that, they also need Carolina to go in ranked to the ACC championship, and then Clemson has to beat them big. And when I say big, I mean by at least 28 points to even consider a shot to the playoffs. That's why I said I'm fairly confident ACC's out. Oregon needs to win out. They need to have Georgia as the lone undefeated team. They need to win wide margin, 21 or better, against USC in the Pac-12 championship. It has to be USC. They're the biggest brand that can bring that extra light to Oregon. They also, it wouldn't hurt them if one of these other teams, like Michigan, Tennessee, somewhere in those range, they slip, they fall. And now Oregon's at a one loss and those other teams are not. Ole Miss needs to win out, win the SEC to make the playoffs. But that means beating Alabama and Georgia. So, and they also need LSU to take another loss because currently LSU has the tiebreaker against Ole Miss because they beat Ole Miss. Very simple. LSU, to make the playoffs, needs to beat Georgia. They need to win out, beat Georgia, and become the SEC championship. To become the SEC champion. It's simple as that. A 2-loss LSU team who beat Alabama, who beat Georgia, Ole Miss, and all these other teams, they would make it in. I don't see them leaving the SEC champ out. I just don't. LSU making it in does lead to the possibility of a 3 SEC team playoff, which would be Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU. At that point, I think what would happen is whoever wins the Ohio State-Michigan game would make it. TCU's resume doesn't hold up as well against Georgia and Tennessee, and I think the possibility of getting a Georgia, Ohio State, a Georgia, LSU, a Tennessee, Ohio State, a Tennessee, LSU rematch, a possible SEC championship rematch. There's a lot of storylines in there that I think the committee would love. Unfortunately, it's not a 12-team. But if it was, this is how I would do it. So, Georgia would be my number 1 seed. TCU would be my number 2. Ohio State would be 3. And then I go to the next highest ranking championship winner. And I think if Clemson beats a ranked North Carolina in the SEC championship, they'll be higher than Oregon. So those are my 4 guys with a bye. And we break it out. Tennessee's my next highest ranked, so they get my lowest. Then Oregon, Michigan, LSU. USC, North Carolina, Alabama, and Tulane as the highest ranked non-Power 5 gets in there. Personally, I would love to see this happen because then you have LSU, USC, Oregon, Alabama, Michigan, North Carolina. Tennessee Tulane's not as an exciting game, unfortunately, but Tennessee Clemson is an exciting game. Then Ohio State Alabama or Ohio State Oregon, exciting games. TCU North Carolina, TCU Michigan, exciting games. Georgia LSU rematch or a Georgia USC game, exciting. And it just extends further and further as you keep watching. I cannot express this enough. I can't wait for a 12-team playoff. I think it's probably one of the better decisions they've made recently, and I am so happy it's coming sooner rather than later. But thank you for joining us. As always, I'm Coach Bill. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know down in the comments if there's a team I missed, if there's a team over ranking, a team that I'm too high on. Let me know. But have a wonderful rest of your day. Ready, Brit.